are talking The Reckoning, directed by Neil Marshall, of course, who directed two wildly loved horror movies in the form of The Descent and Dog Soldiers. He's also directed a number of other movies and a few TV shows as well, including Game of Thrones and Black Sails. And here he reteams with one of his Dog Soldiers actors, Sean Pertwee, and we've also got Charlotte Kirk, who also co-wrote the movie and is our main character, Grace. Now this takes place in 17th century England, where we have a plague sweeping the land, and of course at this time anything that kind of goes wrong, it is blamed on devil worship and such, and there is paranoia running amok through the country as much as this kind of plague is as well. And a lot of people were burned at the stake. You know, this is kind of where this movie is kind of going to be going. And it follows Grace as her husband succumbs to the plague and dies, and a kind of a jealous other guy who wants kind of Grace for herself ultimately causes Grace to be accused of witchcraft. And then she has to face off against the Witchfinder, played by Sean Pertwee, and various kind of accusations, torture, and then because she's being tortured so much and has little sleep, she has images of kind of the devil and stuff. What'll happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. So let's talk about what works first of all. But before we get into that, I do have to say, those of you who are expecting a return to true horror movies, I think maybe you won't find what you're looking at with this movie, to be honest with you. There are some horror elements here, but this is much more of a period drama thriller to a certain degree, if we're being completely honest. But let's talk about what works. I think the location shooting here, I believe this was shot in Hungary, but it does make for a good period setting in that type of time within England, and we get lots of kind of nice wide shots. It's not all kind of, shot in rooms and things like that, so we do get a sense that this is the country and kind of obviously what is going on. There's lots of kind of set decoration in regards to putrefying bodies, and they're kind of being eaten by rats and stuff like that, so you do get the real sense of rot and decay kind of permeating from kind of the sequences within this movie, and I think that is very well done. And you can kind of understand, I think the movie does a good job of making you understand the mindset of people and how quickly they kind of jump to conclusions. There's quite a good scene in the bar where Grace ultimately gets kind of first accused of becoming a witch really, or being a witch, and you just see how people just jump from one conclusion to the other until ultimately it arrives at witchcraft. They kind of just go, oh, that must be it, And it's essentially a commentary on obviously how women were treated, certainly in those days, because essentially pretty much every female character in this movie is a victim, and nearly every male character is some type of oppressor or kind of a bad character, if that makes sense. There's a couple of exceptions, but 90% of the guys here are pretty much despicable. And then we do get some kind of quite nice horror imagery here. There are some wonderfully directed visual shots here, and quite artistic, I have to say. I mean, like I said, Neil Marshall is an accomplished director, so he can set up, a good shot composition, and we do get some fantastic shots in regards to this kind of demon that seems to be appearing to Grace. And it will remind you of the old sort of style medieval art that you would see in kind of like, in books and things like that. So I think it's wonderfully evocative and, and really quite beautiful at times. I have to say, I was quite enjoying Sean Pertwee as our Witchfinder. He was kind of channeling kind of like Vincent Price, I thought, in a certain degree. And we have some really kind of despicable bad guys as well. Put a pin in that because I do have a little bit of an issue with this, but we'll address that in just a minute. But it's a wonderfully rich atmosphere, I think this movie has, and as I say, the set dressing, costumes, all fantastic. But what doesn't work? Okay, I don't think this movie really offers anything new, if we're honest. We've seen quite a few period films within this kind of time frame of women getting persecuted and accused of witchcraft. And there's plenty of kind of ones that have a horror element to it. But this one, despite it really not having that much of a horror element in it than you may think, I think it doesn't really do anything new, to be honest with you. I think this is kind of like very much a predictable storyline and seems kind of generic, really. I mean, the Descent and Dog Soldiers were so groundbreaking in their kind of the way they were made. And despite we have, it was a monster movie and a werewolf movie, but they were still kind of groundbreaking and felt fresh and new. This doesn't. I was kind of reminded of the Nicolas Cage, I think it's Season of the Witch to a certain degree, but with less actually overt horror. It's just kind of quite generic. I think, to be honest with you, it goes a little bit ham-fisted to some of the kind of the characterizations as well, because we have the it really makes a point of showing how bad some of these these guys are. We have this squire who is the guy who ultimately sets the kind of the events in motion with that leads to Grace's fate, and I don't know, it was just a little over top. It almost seems like you've got to make him almost a Disney villain in a way to make him so bad and such a pig. And I'm not saying there weren't people like that, but it just seems like it's not particularly sophisticated. I mean, Grace as a character, she's so brave and courageous and pure, and her husband seemed all fantastic, and the bad guys just seem all really kind of OTT. It's one or the other. We don't really ever get any kind of characters that have any kind of nuance. They're either completely kind of evil or horrible, or just downright, repugnant, or we get characters who just seem almost saintly, to be honest with you. There's nothing really in between. They're either one or the other. No type of nuanced kind of characters in this movie. I've got to say, Kirk as well, as a leading lady, I think she struggled with a lot of the kind of the heavy lifting in regards to acting wise. She is in more or less every scene, to be honest, because it's very much her point of view. But unfortunately, I think Charlotte Kirk is not bad necessarily, but not particularly compelling either, I would say. And there are certain line deliveries that do seem a little bit contemporary and not particularly portraying really a lot of emotions and things. It just seems to be kind of blank-faced a lot of the time. They say not necessarily bad, but I don't think she did a particularly great performance. It seemed a B-movie performance, to be honest with you. And to be honest, I was expecting a little more from this film. Now, again, this isn't really a criticism because the film is what it is, but I do feel I have to say that people who are expecting more of a like I say, an overt horror with more of supernatural elements, I think will be disappointed in this one. It does play more or less like a kind of a straightforward, very, very straightforward drama, really, with just a little bit of kind of extra kind of gore. Even the torture scenes, I don't think are particularly graphic, really. I mean, we get the idea of what's going on, but it doesn't actually ever really go into any kind of graphic or gruesome kind of details in what we see on the screen. More just the giving us the idea about what is kind of going on, which makes it feel like very much like a kind of a film that was made for TV, and obviously because it's obviously on Amazon and stuff, I guess that is true to a point, but it just doesn't have that kind of the energy that Neil Marshall's seminal films really kind of have. So I don't think this is a return to form. I actually have to say, although not a bad film in any way, and I think it's well made, it's just very middle of the road. It's fine if you like a kind of historic kind of drama which has hints of kind of social commentary of the time, and the whole thing with the plague is kind of touched on, but it's not a huge amount is done with it, to be honest with you. Even the kind of the witch stuff, the witchcraft stuff, again. Almost, I think you might be expecting more from it, but as it stands at the moment, it's okay, it's fine, it's watchable, but you won't want to watch it again. You kind of, you won't be kind of remembering this as one of the good Neil Marshall films as such. It's just serviceable, workmanlike, whatever you want to say. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.